So what was your response to the offensive display during the Olympic ceremony? I'm Ben. I'm here with Dan. We are the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship Church. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Are you offended?
I did not watch it at the time.
I didn't watch it at the time yet. I only saw it.
You know, I quit watching the Olympics after the communism fell. Because when I was growing up, no, seriously. No. So
Dan for 30-some years has not watched the Olympics.
I don't watch it like I used to. No, when you grew up during the Cold War, the Olympics.
You took it personally.
Oh, the Olympics was, beat the commies.
They were all cheaters anyways, though. They would dope and all kinds of stuff.
The other thing is there weren't a lot of, there was 3 channels, 3 main, ABC, NBC, CBS, and the world stopped during the Olympics back in the 60s, 70s. And then it got more political and then more politically correct, and communism fell, and I don't know, I just kind of lost interest. It was really weird.
I think this go round, we have probably watched the least amount of Olympic coverage than we ever have. Yeah. Like I can't.
Why do you think that is?
I didn't watch any of the COVID Olympics. Did you? Like they were delayed
a little bit.
I don't think I watched.
Our families always used to come to we loved when my kids were younger. They loved watching I don't know. They would get into watching archery and they would watch all these weird things because I think they were just novel.
Right. Curling and synchronized swimming.
No, we didn't do that. But but the swimming races, we loved the swimming races. We loved the track and field. We just loved the races. It was fun. I'm not a huge fan of the whole judging, someone twirls around 5 times and oh, that's a 9.8, oh, that's a 9.7. I'm like, well,
in the pool?
Because it feels subjective.
I don't like this. I don't like the judging subjective things. Even gymnastics, it's kind
since
of
the French cheated a few years ago, and nobody's mentioning that, are they? Remember when the French had that big cheating scandal?
That was known as the
That
cheaters.
was 20 years ago.
I
was it really?
Wasn't
that 20 years ago?
Yeah.
I got to see
the lousy French judge.
I feel like it's. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not an expert on this, but I feel like it's still in the milieu that I feel like that still happens. I feel like there's still kind of.
Oh, it's
there's
so
always. And that's the thing was. I know we're getting on such a tangent right now.
What are we talking about right now?
But it's whoever the Russian judge is, they judge harshly anyone who's against the Russians and anyone who's a communist or whatever. It's anyone that's their tribe. It's they get the highest scores. I'm like, is anyone else it's just so blatantly obvious.
You should have been around in the 70s because that was always a big topic. The next day was them stinking communists.
Yeah,
robbed us again.
So you haven't watched the Olympics?
I watched a little. I had it on last night while I was grading papers. So it was in the background.
But you heard about the I'm mentioning
on social media.
The reason why we're having this conversation is because this whole Dan and I like to talk about culturally relevant issues. Mm-hmm. This kind of blew up on Friday night. That and I got a kind of a heads up because my brother lives in Germany. And he was like, do not watch the opening ceremony tonight. It is pretty raunchy. And so we just didn't watch it. I didn't know how raunchy. I didn't know what they were going to put on display. But obviously, everyone, social media started blowing up. I didn't watch it, but because my kids both of my boys, they had a bunch of friends over, and all of a sudden their social media is blowing up. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this. So I was made aware of it.
Yeah. So in case someone's been living under a rock, the big
controversy
brouhaha is over a drag queen depiction of what most people interpreted as, and was later confirmed by many of the French officials, as a depiction of the Last Supper.
Yeah, the painting of Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper. Yeah.
And so later on, there was an attempt to recategorize that as the Feast of
Dionysus or whatever, whatever, some Greek god.
And that was absurd.
Because the posture, the positioning, it was almost identical to the painting.
Even the people that were in it knew what they were doing. But that's pretty typical because Kamala Harris was never the border czar either. So people with an agenda are going to change the facts.
So a drag queen depiction of the Last Supper.
You're right, and then, a lot of people were very visibly upset, a lot of reaction, a lot of response, because we all loved being outraged. That's part of what keeps social media, right? And here's where I've been far more, and August is my fast month from social media, so I'm prepping. I got 2 more days that just...
So before you get into your assessment, what was your original response?
It was like, yeah, this is over the line. This is ridiculous. He wouldn't do this to Muslims. I was just irritated. This idea of being offended, I'm just irritated. I was cranky about it. I'm like, here we go again. But also like, this stupid French, they always do stuff. And I don't mean that to be, like some kind of nationalistic thing, but French people are known for this. They've always been this
they
weird level of artistic, immoral pagans.
I remember a few years ago, a few of their cartoonists got killed because they drew depictions of Muhammad. So they're always pushing the envelope of you kind of poking the eye in whatever is sacred. Yeah, that's kind of what they've been known for.
Yeah, and historically, they've always just been that way. They call themselves a Catholic country, but they're nominally Catholic. It was more of their. Yeah, they're known as one of the Catholic countries. Yeah,
I didn't know that French side of themselves.
Yeah.
Well, that's where Notre Dame is.
Yeah, I said like in my mind, like I'm contrasting with Ireland,
but it's all culture.
Been like really, really.
Okay, no, I'm not talking about adherence. I'm talking about identity.
Okay,
and it goes back to Spain, France, and then England was Church of England.
If you think about it, this is a little bit of church history, but back in the 13th and 14th centuries, you had the Avignon exile, which is where the papacy relocated for over 100 years from Rome, and basically there was this tie between the French monarchy and the Catholic Church, and they were trying to move everything, the seat of the papacy, to France.
Yeah, and there was a period of oppressions of Protestants, particularly against the French Huguenots. Because I actually have some DNA from that branch, and so they.
By the way, did you know there's one Huguenot church in North America? And it's in Charleston, South Carolina. You can go visit.
City of Church. Isn't that called City of Churches?
The church.
There's one Huguenot church. And a Huguenot simply was a French Protestant. That's all what a Huguenot meant. But there's one Huguenot church. It's hundreds of years old, and they have continued to, they still meet to this day.
I have to go there at some point,
It was so cool because I went there years ago.
The service is still in French?
No. But the guy, we were walking by at the perfect time, and some guy was opening the door coming. I was like, hey, I've always wanted to go in this church because I love old churches. Yeah. And I'm like, can I just see this church? And I'm like, yeah. He showed me around, told me the history of it. It was amazing. It was fascinating. But the St. Bartholomew's massacre or something like that? Yeah, I said massacre.
It's happening.
St. Bartholomew massacre.
Are you sure you haven't been watching a lot of Olympics?
By the way, okay, so sidetrack. The French do this. There's outrage. And Dan, I know you love a good sparring match, online sparring match.
Indeed, I do.
I thought you were about to deny that.
No, I can't deny it.
But Dan loves to.
I love the intellectual back and forth. Until somebody starts yelling at me.
If there's a social media verbal mosh pit, Dan will be in the middle of it. That's basically
with my
what
hands
it comes
in the air. Well, and I've been known to stir a pot or two.
Yes, you have. You've been known to start the mosh pit every once in a while. So tell me what your assessment is of it.
Well, the thing that, interestingly, it hasn't divided down traditional lines, but immediately the lecturing left of the evangelicals came out in force. Bottom line is that I was not happy with the depiction, but what really offends me is the hate that Christians have poured on the French. Okay, being offended is not hateful. And also just simply saying, that was not kosher. It was inappropriate. That's not hateful. Yeah. And then the lectures on like, if we really loved people, we wouldn't, all this stuff. And it just got deeper and deeper and wider. And that's when I jumped in the fray. Because my question, I guess, for some evangelicals today is, what would it take for you to be offended for the cause of Christ? Really?
Thank you.
What would it take, honestly? And they say, well, somebody accused the people of idolatry. We've iconizing a painting. No, it's a symbol, because Jesus lives in heaven. He doesn't live on earth. All right. They can't spit on him now, so they spit on anything that represents him. So back in the 80s, a guy by the name of Robert Mapplethorpe, which is a famous gay photographer, did a whole series of things to offend Christians. He did it intentionally. You look it up on the internet, it's still there. One of them was called Piss Christ. He took a crucifix, he put it in a large glass vat, and he filled it with his own urine and took pictures of it. That was one of the nicer things he did, actually. One of the things I can actually describe on radio with knowledge that kids are listening to this. And it is this notion that somehow it is acceptable to denigrate Christianity. Of course, we all know that's going to happen. Christ himself said that. But I don't see anywhere in Scripture that says, well, we should be okay with that. And I said, well, you got to forgive them. I can forgive them, but I'm also going to say, this isn't right. This is unholy. This is profane. This is offensive. And I just want to know, for some Christians, what would it take? Because I tell you what, they wouldn't let somebody take a picture of their mama and have it submerged in urine without having a reaction. You wouldn't want to take a family photograph and have drag queens do it. When it comes to our family, we would get offended at this. We would say, stop it.
So one of your concerns, rightly so, is there's a number of Christians that just refuse to be offended by anything.
No, it's beyond that. My concern is there in evangelical Christianity is a large segment that every time Christians try to take a stand for right, for holiness or righteousness, for biblical standards, come back and tell us that our opposition is unchristlike. And it's a point counterpoint thing, which absolutely ends up canceling out Christianity's testimony to be light and salt in the world. Salt burns. Light makes cockroaches run. Part of what we're supposed to do is speak up on behalf of truth. Da Vinci was probably a gay. He certainly owned by the Pope. They paid these guys to make all this great art during this time. It isn't about Da Vinci, but it's about a sacred moment, a moment that was sacred for all of us. And did Jesus look like that? No. Did they all sit on the same side of the table? No. We know all that. So quit throwing up these absurd arguments like, well, it's not even a real depiction. It is a symbol.
It's a symbol. And the whole idea is that they knew what they were doing. They knew they were mocking.
They were poking Christians in the eye for response, which is what modern art does, which is a whole other podcast.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying, what I hear you saying is Christians should be offended.
Yeah.
Should be offended. Okay.
Yeah. We ought to be offended also when we're watching a movie and they do the same thing.
Okay. So you're saying being consistently offended.
Being consistently offended. Does the name of God mean anything? Then maybe Christians ought to quit saying, oh my God. And maybe we ought to quit saying GD it.
Yeah.
Because those are using the Lord's name in vain as well. That's offensive to God. But, so we pick and choose. I get that. Christians are hypocrites. Yeah, I get that as well. But at some point, should we not say, this is a line you ought not cross? And if you do, I'm going to respond. I'm going to say, no, this isn't right. I'm not going to shoot you. I'm not going to, So you can watch the Olympics. I don't care. I'm not calling for a boycott.
Yeah, we actually recorded some episodes on boycotts, like what should Christians
years
do
ago.
But okay, so here's my take on it, because I think what I want to know is, what does a proper response of offendedness look like? Because for me, I remember the first time I saw something that made me mad, that mocked my faith. I was taking a fine arts class in college, and Dr. Carter, who was a brilliant teacher, amazing, he wanted to give these young Baptist hillbillies some culture. So he would take our groups into New York City, and we would eat at a very fine restaurant, and we would go to the New York City Philharmonic, and he would take us to museums, art museums. And so we, big one of the things he would do is he would take us to two art museums. One was the Frick collection, which was a very refined collection in New York City, and there's these beautiful masterpieces in the Frick Museum. And then he would take us to the Guggenheim. The Guggenheim is known for modern art. And I remember going to the Frick first and then going to the Guggenheim, where you saw these beautiful works of art on display. And then you go to Guggenheim and it's just like, that's art. It's because it's modern art and a lot of interpretation. But I remember walking by this one display, and this person had painted a picture of the crucifixion scene, but they made Jesus into a chimpanzee.
Nice.
And I just remember the first time being so it made me angry that they were trying to just belittle and minimize and mock the Savior who died for me.
Yeah.
And so for me, I just remember getting really angry, but I didn't know what to do with that anger. So when there's been other things that have happened throughout the years where they mock our faith, they mock Christianity. And I think there is this sense of, I think some Christians misinterpret the turn the other cheek thing for Jesus, and we don't have time to get into all of what that means, but that does not mean you can be a doormat for to have people treat you however they want to treat you. No, that's not what that means. It does not. What it doesn't mean is you don't retaliate to kind of like, get back, but what you do is you never let your dignity go away. You turn and you face them and say, if you're going to hurt me, then you better see what you're actually damaging an image of God. That's what he's saying. Like, don't diminish who you are. But Dan, I hear what you're saying is we should be consistently. There should be a right kind of offense that we have consistently.
Yeah, and I think it goes around the person of Christ too.
Yes.
Make fun of fat preachers. I don't care. No, serious. I mean, seriously, in fact, I think there's a lot of humor in, the Dollywood form of Christianity, if you know what I'm saying, the deep South.
Yeah.
All right. Mock me for my, stories or whatever.
Yeah.
But don't mock my Jesus. That's where I draw the hard line.
Okay, so I like what you're saying there, because The Simpsons used to get into real troubles with this. So you rolled your eyes. You don't like The Simpsons. I love The Simpsons. The first 8 seasons of The Simpsons
and I refuse to watch them because of what they do with that. And South Park.
Brilliance.
And South Park does it.
Okay, but here's I think what The Simpsons were doing was actually making fun of it. The whole point of The Simpsons was sarcasm.
Yes.
That's the whole point.
What's interesting is I actually preferred it when South Park made fun of Christianity or pro-lifers versus Family Guy. It was always better, I think, for our side when South Park did, because when South Park would go after Christians or pro-lifers or whatever, it was gross. It was gross humor, but you felt kind of bad. Whereas Family Guy, it was very like intellectual targeted. It was just mocking kind of a thing. And I was like, there was like a stem cell research episode of South Park that I was like, you can't watch this without feeling pretty gross for the other side. And I was like, hey, here's 2 kind of different takes on this kind of a gross humor thing versus like this intellectual, I'm going to make fun of you for being stupid because you're a Christian kind of thing.
Yeah. So to me, the Ned Flanders, who's the Christian, the evangelical Christian on The Simpsons, he's this overly nice person who can never get angry at anything.
Yeah.
And it drives Homer crazy. The whole point, but here's the thing, they don't just make fun of Christians, they make fun of bosses. They make fun of moms, they make fun of dads. They made fun of the whole point was satire. It was look at yourself in the mirror and learn to laugh at yourself. Yes. That was the whole point of The Simpsons. So
I don't have a problem with that though.
But that's what I'm saying. So to me, it's okay to poke fun at yourself, and I like what you're saying. Don't be offended when they look at the idiosyncrasies of what you do.
Yeah.
Learn to laugh at yourself. That's not offensive. It's when they mock Jesus.
Yeah.
It's when they belittle who he is.
It's when Bart Simpson sat down to his Thanksgiving dinner and said, "Dear God, we worked for this food. We cooked it ourselves.
So thanks for nothing."
Thanks for nothing.
Yeah.
That to me crosses that line.
I think that crossed the line as well.
Yeah.
So that wasn't right.
And that's the only episode, by the way, of The Simpsons I think I ever saw.
I think it was like the first or second episode.
That's all it took.
Yeah,
I was done. And then I
see you missed out on 8 years of great television.
No, then I made thousands of dollars with a seminar. No, I'm serious. With a seminar that I turned into
Raising
a Beaver kids in a Bart Simpson world.
Oh yes,
yeah. So that was my 80s. But
So Dan, we only got 3 minutes left.
Holy cow! Where did the time go?
What is the right way? How do we show a proper level of righteous anger and righteous offensive response that is in line with our faith?
I don't think we have to define that for anybody other than I think there should be some response on our part, whether it's to turn the TV off or simply to say this was inappropriate or to have some kind of announcement at some level that this was not okay. This wasn't okay. Don't be silent in the face of that. I wrote on my own wall, yesterday, this principle, and I'm trying to pull it up real quick here, but I said, it is neither unloving nor a poor testimony to be offended by evil things. Mm-hmm. It's not unloving when someone does something that's cruel to say, don't stop that. Yeah. And if Jesus is who he is, and we believe that, then to me that's like I would like to think that if I was at the crucifixion of Christ, I would have been John, not Peter. And
we hope that we would.
I would pray that would be the case.
Yeah.
However, how could I expect to have been John and not Peter if I can't even say, don't use my Lord's name that way.
Yeah.
Don't use his depiction that way. Yeah. So I mean, to me, that's baby steps to the idea that at some point, people have been called to give their life for Christ, to seal with their blood what they have taught with their lips, as John Huss said.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the question I want to ask people. What would it take for you to take a stand for the one who literally died for you?
So I think that everyone's has their own conscious response of, how do I respond to what I just saw? I think some people will probably turn off the Olympics and never watch another minute of it. There'll be some people that will write letters, or I think every Christian, there needs to be two things. Number one, I do think you should let your voice be heard. Mm-hmm. We have an incredible opportunity to speak out. But I would also say this: don't be a jerk.
Yeah. You don't have to be a jerk.
Don't be a jerk. Don't be offensive the other way.
Yeah, don't take your TV out in the yard and shoot it.
I think the problem is that sometimes Christians respond and then they say something extremely hateful towards.
Mm-hmm. Or at least people say we do. But again, I saw that over. I'm disgusted by the hate of the Christians. Is hate disagreeing? Because that's how they want to define it.
I don't think that's hate.
But I don't think have you seen anybody who said we ought to take those drag queens out and hang? Nobody said that. I
don't think that. I think that people have said that, though. I'm not saying I have seen it. I'm just saying I know people have probably said stuff like that. That's Absolutely. The Christians I don't like.
Yes. Well, I mean, and there's also people who would say they should take Christians out and hang them as well.
So there's these extremes. All I'm saying is don't be a jerk. You can speak the truth in love. You can stand up for what is right. You can be offended in a spirit of truth and grace.
And don't be super emotional about it. Just be matter of fact about it.
But let your voice be heard.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Yeah. And to those who feel like they get pious points for criticizing their brothers and sisters in Christ, cut it out. I'm serious. For years I didn't want to be associated with fundamentalists because of fundamentalist attitudes. Mm-hmm. And I find that same way with evangelicals today. I don't want to be classified with an evangelical because we do this with every single controversy, point, counterpoint among our own. We don't speak with any kind of unified voice, and so we cancel it. Yeah. We absolutely cancel any impact to be salt and light because we've got this deep schism of whether or not holiness ought to matter, whether God's word is truth. Yeah. And
one just quick thought for me is a lot of common ground here, and I know that I am less easily offended, so I know that my compass can kind of be off, but I really like the idea of consistent outrage. Let's have consistent outrage. So my one tip for Christians who are trying to figure out how do I write about this in a way that is not going to be super off-putting would be, if we are going to be really offended by this, and perhaps we should also be offended by Van de Velde, the Dutch Olympic athlete who got allowed into the Olympics, even though he went to jail for raping a 12-year-old. This is
I didn't even hear this story. Wow.
This is a huge global scandal. He did get booed, as he should have been, but the fact that he was allowed in, he was in jail for this, and he still got allowed in. There's so maybe kind of talking about there are some weird decisions getting made by the Olympics in Paris, and there's a lot of funny things being talked about. The Olympics Village is a nightmare. They're on cardboard. There's no AC. You can kind of make fun of that too. But there's here's some weird things, and obviously this, because we should be more offended by that probably than anything in the opening.
The IOC is not, as Obi-Wan Kenobi said about Mos Eisley, it's a wretched hive of wretched. I just mix it.
Come on, why can't we do this? Something to villainy. Something to villainy.
All the Star Wars fans.
Scum and villainy.
Scum and villainy. A wretched hive of scum and villainy. That's the quote we were looking for. Yeah. That's what the IOC is.
I don't think that's an unpopular opinion.
I'm speechless right now that we're quoting Star Wars.
Oh, but it's one of the greatest quotes ever by Obi-Wan Kenobi.
If Ben is leaving here and I'm going to be sticking around, get used to Star Wars quotes.
Goodness. I've got to get my
Star Wars quotes is all.
All right. I hope this has been helpful for you if you're listening to this. Maybe you didn't know how to respond. Maybe you had these emotions but didn't know what's the proper way to handle offense. I hope that today has been helpful for you, to make you think, to make you search the scriptures. Don't just listen to Dan and I. Look at the Bible. Look what Jesus said himself. How do we respond to those who hate us? And I think that's a really important lesson for all of us to walk through. So thanks again for joining us on Life Talks. We'll talk to you next time.